Welcome to the Mike Bates Show. This is Mike Bates. All lives matter. There, I said it. Does that make me a racist? Have you ever been kicked out of your home because of skin color? I have. It wasn't my skin color, it was my roommate's skin color. In 1987, I was kicked out of my apartment because I had a black roommate. The story would take too long to tell, so I don't have time to tell it right now, but I will tell it in detail on a future episode. I have seen real racism. I've been a victim of it. But to say that America has a problem of systemic racism is patently false. Black Lives Matter should be Black Lies Matter, because it was built upon lies by dishonest race agitators. Black Lives Matter began after the acquittal of George Zimmerman in the justified self-defense shooting of Trayvon Martin. It rose to national prominence after the justified self-defense shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson. It then morphed into a movement that now gets worked up at the slightest affront to many leftist causes, especially the race-based ones. Despite all the evidence that Michael Brown was not surrendering with his hands in the air when he was justifiably shot by Officer Darren Wilson, "Hands up, don't shoot" is Black Lives Matter's most common war chant. And by doing that, they perpetuate the lies about Michael Brown's justified death. Now, I think Philando Castile's shooting death was not proper. But Black Lives Matter's rallying cry isn't, "I'm reaching for the ID you requested, officer, don't shoot." They chant, "Hands up, don't shoot." In other words, Black Lives Matter and their supporters are liars or uninformed. But neither is acceptable to me. People continue to protest the death of Michael Brown as if he was some sort of folk hero victim. He was not. Yet the lies are retold by leftist agitators in the media, Congress, the NFL, and elsewhere, who are more interested in stirring up discontent and animosity than they're interested in the truth. The left is never interested in the truth. The left is interested in exploiting racial tensions, even if they have to foment hatred based on fabricated stories. If police going unpunished for killing black people is so prevalent, then why don't they cite legitimate instances? Now, I can think of two instances of it: Eric Garner and Philando Castile. I do think George Floyd's death was illegal, but Officer Chauvin is not going unpunished. So how does his death count as racist cops getting away with murder? Derek Chauvin has been charged, and hopefully he'll be convicted and sentenced to the maximum time in prison allowed by law. Any movement built on lies is a fraud, and the Black Lives Matter movement is Exhibit A. And those who support it are a disgrace. Colin Kaepernick is held up as the superhero of Black Lives Matter because of his protests. But why did Colin Kaepernick begin his kneeling protest during the national anthem? Do you know? Seriously, do you know? Or have you just accepted what the dishonest, agenda-driven media has spoon-fed you? Most people think Kaepernick's kneeling was to protest racism in America. But it wasn't. His reason was not that broad. But that's what most propagandists on TV have said his reason was, so people believe it. Well, as you're aware, unless this is the first time you've ever heard my radio program, I've been in the media for 40 years. I've seen it from the inside. I know not to believe anything the news media ever reports about an issue that has any political angle to it. I verify things myself, and when I did, I found that, as usual, the media was lying. And there's no excuse for it. Why do I know the reason he kneeled, but the media doesn't? Well, the media, to use a legal phrase, knew or should have known the reason Kaepernick kneeled, but they didn't report it. So what was his reason? Well, this is not my opinion. This is fact. It is Kaepernick's own words. On August 26, 2016, after a 49ers loss to Green Bay in a preseason game, Colin Kaepernick gave an interview to NFL media where he explained the reason he was protesting. That game was the second time he took a knee during the national anthem. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be any audio or video recording of that interview. Believe me, I've looked. His words are only available, at least publicly, in the written form. So I'll read them to you. From NFL media, quote, "I am not going to stand up to show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses black people and people of color. To me, this is bigger than football, and it would be selfish on my part to look the other way. There are bodies in the street and people getting paid leave and getting away with murder." End quote. He was quite clearly saying that he was protesting killings by police, although he didn't use the word police. But what else would he have meant by people getting paid leave and getting away with murder? He was obviously referring to police. But do the police get paid leave and get away with murder? No. It's true that they get put on paid administrative leave during an investigation into any death caused by their actions. Even if a cop kills a felon in a shootout, which the felon started, he gets paid administrative leave during the investigation. That's standard protocol. But it's not a reward for the killing. It's to keep him out of the police station so he can't exert undue influence on the investigation. The paid leave is so justice can be served, not so justice can be denied. And what about the getting away with murder part? Do police in America get away with murder? No. If the investigation justifies murder charges, the officer is charged with murder. Would Kaepernick prefer that police get charged with crimes they didn't commit? Remember Michael Slager, the police officer in North Charleston, South Carolina, who shot the fleeing black man in the back? He's in prison serving a 20-year sentence. That doesn't sound like getting away with murder to me. Does it to you? Remember Jason Van Dyke, the police officer who shot and killed a 17-year-old black man in Chicago? The guy was armed with a knife, but the video showed that he was backing away from the officer when he got shot. Well, that cop is serving time for second-degree murder. That doesn't sound like getting away with murder to me. Does it to you? Remember Robert Bates? No relation to me. Robert Bates, the reserve sheriff's deputy in Oklahoma who shot and killed a black man who was resisting arrest. He said he intended to use his taser, but accidentally used his real gun. Remember? He was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to prison. That doesn't sound like getting away with murder to me. Does it to you? Remember Roy Oliver, the Texas police officer who shot into a car filled with black teenagers who were leaving a house party? His bullet killed one of those teens. And he was convicted of murder for it. He got 15 years. That doesn't sound like getting away with murder to me. Does it to you? All those officers were white, by the way, not that race should matter, but since the Black Lives Matter movement is all about white cops killing innocent black people and getting away with it, I suppose it is germane in this context because it counters the lies. Remember Eric Garner, the guy in Staten Island who was killed by the cops when he resisted arrest for the absurd crime of selling Lucy cigarettes? He's the guy who said he couldn't breathe back in 2014. Based on what I saw, the police officer should have been charged with his death. But you know what? A grand jury, which saw far more evidence than I did, decided not to indict. And remember the adage that you can indict a ham sandwich. The burden of proof required for an indictment is extremely low. Only the prosecutor gets to present evidence to the grand jury. There's no defense testimony, there's no defense witnesses, and there's no defense cross-examination of any evidence. If the grand jury chose not to indict, after considering the evidence for an astonishing 9 weeks, by the way, I trust that the evidence just didn't justify an indictment. There were 23 people from the community on that grand jury. 14 were white, 5 were black, and 4 were something else. The vote count was never made public, which is normal for a grand jury proceeding. Even the U.S. Justice Department, under the authority of Attorney General Eric Holder and the race agitator-in-chief Barack Obama, did not press federal civil rights charges against the officer. You know the evidence had to be weak for that to happen. Eric Garner wasn't killed because of his skin color. It wasn't an example of racist cops. It was an example of overly aggressive cops. And don't forget that the police tried to arrest him nicely, but he refused and resisted. And here's another fact about the Eric Garner case that almost nobody knows because the so-called news media deliberately chose not to report it. The senior officer at the scene, the incident commander, Sergeant Kizzy Adonis, was a black female officer. She's the one who ordered the neck hold takedown. I'm pretty sure she wasn't a racist, and neither was the white cop who followed her instructions. The death of Michael Brown in Ferguson was not murder. A Missouri grand jury and Obama's Justice Department both decided against pursuing any charges against Officer Darren Wilson. Why? Because he shot Michael Brown in absolutely necessary and justified self-defense. Someone was going to die that day. And if it wasn't Michael Brown, it was going to be Officer Wilson. Would the Black Lives Matter protesters have preferred that outcome? A dead cop but a live felon? Yeah, probably. The Black Lives Matter movement is that despicable. Michael Brown's death in Ferguson occurred because he violently attacked a police officer who properly defended himself. Had Michael Brown been white and done the same thing, he would have been shot also. Just nobody outside Ferguson would have heard about it. Brown's hands weren't up when he was shot. Brown was attacking Officer Wilson. Yet the dishonest rallying cry of "hands up, don't shoot" is still chanted by today's protesters who are either ignorant of the facts or don't care what the facts are. And neither is acceptable to me. If you have to lie to promote your cause, then your cause shouldn't be promoted. And this current case, the improper and unlawful death of George Floyd, the officer who killed him, Derek Chauvin, has been charged with murder. Now, as I explained in last week's program, prosecutors have overcharged him. He's not guilty of murder under Minnesota law. He's guilty of manslaughter in the second degree. If you missed last week's show and want to hear it, it's archived online as a podcast at www.themikebatesshow.com, as are all my shows. Listen, I condemn all cases of real racial discrimination. But the cases have to be real, not fabricated. I've run quite long with this segment, so let's take a quick break. And when we get back, I'll correct the false claim that black people in America are targeted by racist cops. When the Mike Bates Show continues. Welcome back to the Mike Bates Show. This is Mike Bates. The Black Lives Matter movement blames Republicans for systemic racism in America. Not because it's true, it isn't true. Black Lives Matter is not about protecting black people. It's about electing Democrats. Yet the truth is that all Americans, which includes black people obviously, are treated better by Republicans than by Democrats. The Democratic Party is the party of slavery, Jim Crow laws, the Ku Klux Klan, and rampant racial discrimination against minorities in this country. President Lincoln was a Republican, and it has always been, and still is, Republican policies that require black people to be treated equally in America. Democrats still base many of their policies upon one's skin color, and that's disgraceful. But we're force-fed the dishonest narrative that America is racist, cops are racist, Trump is racist, and every Republican is racist. We're told that police in America kill far more black people than they kill white people. It's a classic example of how if you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, Eventually, people will come to believe it. But what's the truth? What do the objective facts say? Remember, I'm all about objective facts. We can differ on opinions, but we cannot differ on facts. So what are the objective facts? Well, according to the Washington Post's database on fatal encounters with law enforcement, which has been tabulating numbers since 2015, far more white people than black people are killed by the police. In 2019, 1,004 people were shot and killed by police. Most of them were armed and violent, and therefore deserved it. Some of them were suicide by cop, which is when a suicidal person deliberately provokes an officer to kill him. Well, we need to focus on police encounters that were fatal to unarmed people. So how many unarmed people were killed by the police in 2019? 56. And the racial composition of those 56 deaths? White, 25, which is 44.6%. Black, 15, which is 26.8%. Hispanic, 11, 19.6%. And other, 5, which is 8.9%. So police killed 67% more unarmed white people than unarmed black people. But I challenge you to, without looking it up, name one of the deceased white or Hispanic people. You can't. Because the activist media hasn't amplified those deaths for political purposes as they have the deaths of unarmed black people. It's also critical to acknowledge that 100% of those 56 decedents had something in common before they died. They all refused to comply with the lawful instructions of police officers. Now, it's unfortunate that anyone gets killed by the police. And excessive force by the police is a serious problem in this country. But to say that police in America can illegally kill black people and get away with it is patently untrue and provably false. Okay, I got to make a couple of points about that database. The Post's analysis of data over 5 years revealed that the number, circumstances, and demographics of the deceased have remained relatively constant every year. The Post database only includes deaths from police shootings. But since the overwhelming majority of deaths at the hands of police officers are shootings, the non-shooting death count would not change the ratios in any significant manner. Also, the Post database counts all shooting deaths that were the result of police encounters. It includes both justified homicides and unjustified homicides. Okay, I know the obvious rebuttal. That is, if 26.8% of unarmed people killed by police were black, but only 13.4% of the population is black, then the cops are twice as likely to kill a black person because of racism. Well, comparing against a straight population percentage is not a valid comparison. If it was, you'd have to also say that cops kill unarmed black females at a rate far below their population percentage. Because almost all police killings result in dead men, not dead women. And that gender gap applies to all races. White women are killed by cops far below their population percentage also. So if the disparity is not based on race or gender, then what is it based on? It's based upon crime rates, which cause confrontational interactions with the police. Now, you may not like these statistics. These numbers are from the FBI's Uniform Crime Report. They are objective numbers. They are not racist, prejudicial, bigoted, or discriminatory in any way. They are just raw statistics. Black people comprise 13.4% of the U.S. population. But according to the FBI statistics in the Uniform Crime Report, black people commit 26.8% of all crimes, which is exactly twice their population percentage. And if we break it down by the type of crime, black people commit 52.6% of murders, 54.4% of all robberies, 29.0% of rapes, 33.2% of aggravated assaults, 31.3% of simple assaults, 29.1% of burglaries, and 30.7% of automobile thefts. I looked for a category of crime that black people commit at a rate lower than their 13.4% of the population, and there wasn't one. The category of crime that most closely aligned with the population percentage was DUIs, driving under the influence, at 13.6%, which is 0.2% higher than the population. Just in case you're wondering, the white people's crime that is most disproportionate to their population is DUIs. White people comprise 76.5% of the population, but they account for 82.1% of DUIs. And violating liquor laws, which is almost entirely underage drinking, white people commit 79.1% of those offenses. So why do black people commit crimes at rates far higher than their percent of the population? I'll tell you after this break, but I'll give you this hint before we go. It has nothing to do with being black. I'll explain when the Mike Bates Show continues. Welcome back to the Mike Bates Show. This is Mike Bates. Why do black people commit crimes at rates far higher than their percent of the population? It's got nothing to do with being black. I mean, there is correlation, but not causation. Being black is not the cause of high crime rates committed by black people. And neither is racism. The biggest problem faced by black people in America today is not racism. It's not police brutality. It's not even poverty. And it's not a lack of opportunity. It's actually something the Black Lives Matter activists never speak about and would never admit, even though it's true. The biggest problem faced by black people in America today is the lack of fathers involved in the lives of their children. Fatherhood is that important. And it's important to every demographic. I wasn't a perfect kid. I did plenty of stupid things as a teenager I regret doing. But for the most part, I managed to turn out okay. Was it because of my white privilege? No. Was it because of my family's wealth? No. My father was in the military, and I would describe us as middle class. But you know what I did have? I had an intact family. My parents were involved in my life. We had dinner around the table as a family, and the TV wasn't on while we ate. We actually had to talk to each other. I had 3 brothers, so it wasn't all me. The conversation was shared, thankfully, but the conversation took place. My parents expressed interest in our lives. They knew what we were up to. My parents took us to church. My parents met my teachers. My dad coached my youth sports teams. My dad drove me to the radio station at 5:30 in the morning when I was 14 years old because I had to be on the air at 6 before school started. My mom drove me too. I don't want to take away any credit she deserves. She deserves a lot of credit. I had a great mother. But this is about fatherhood and about the importance of fathers in shaping the direction of a child's life. The presence of a father is the dividing line. It is the fork in the road. It is the difference between success and failure. When it came to behaving, and again, I wasn't perfect, but when it came to behaving, when it came to obeying the law, you know what? I didn't behave because I was afraid of what the police would do if I got caught. I behaved because I was afraid of what my dad would do if I got caught. I remember one time when my dad was stationed in Long Beach, California. I was in probably the 6th, maybe the 7th grade. I got in trouble for something at school. And this was back in the day when teachers could administer corporal punishment. I don't remember what my offense was. I have no idea what I did to get in trouble. And by that, I mean I have no idea now. I obviously knew then, and whatever it was, I admit I deserved it. But I got a severe paddling with a wooden paddle in the principal's office one day after school. He made me bend over a small wooden chair and beat my ass with that paddle. It hurt like hell, and it wasn't just one. I don't remember how many swats I got, but I do remember he hit me hard and it hurt. And I had to walk home with a hurt butt, knowing that it would get even worse when I got home. How many kids get disciplined by their fathers today? I'm not big on quoting scripture, but Proverbs 22:6 is worth mentioning here. Chapter 22, verse 6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Who's training up children in the way they should go? Please pay very specific attention to the words I'm about to say. You're going to hear them twice. But pay close attention to these words about the problem in the black community. Of all the rocks upon which we build our lives, we are most dependent on the family. The family is that most important foundation. And we are called to recognize and honor how critical every father is to that foundation. They are teachers and coaches. They're mentors and they're role models. They are examples of success and the men who constantly push us toward success. But if we're honest with ourselves, we'll admit that too many fathers are also missing. Too many fathers are MIA. Too many fathers are AWOL. Missing from too many lives and too many homes. They've abandoned their responsibilities. They're acting like boys instead of men. And the foundations of our families have suffered because of it. You and I know this is true everywhere, but nowhere is it more true than in the African American community. We know that more than half of all black children live in single-parent households. Half. A number that's doubled since we were children. We know the statistics that children who grow up without a father are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and commit crime. They're 9 times more likely to drop out of school. 20 times more likely to end up in prison. They're more likely to have behavioral problems or run away from home or become teen parents because a father wasn't in the home. The foundations of our community and our country are weaker because of this. We can't simply write these problems off to past injustices. These injustices are real. There's a reason why our families are in disrepair. And some of it has to do with a tragic history. But we can't keep on using that as an excuse. Did those words make me sound like a racist? I guarantee I will get feedback from this program telling me what a terrible bigot I am for saying that. But I don't care. I know I'm not a racist. And I know that that word is thrown out when an argument can't be won with facts. So it's attempted to be won by playing the race card. Were my words there racist words? Was that message racist? I want you to hear those words again. I asked you before I said them to pay close attention to exact words so you could compare them when you hear the exact words again now.
Of all the rocks upon which we build our lives, we are most dependent on the family. The family is that most important foundation. And we are called to recognize and honor how critical every father is to that foundation. They are teachers and coaches, they're mentors, and they're role models. They are examples of success and the men who constantly push us towards success. But if we're honest with ourselves, we'll admit that too many fathers are also missing. Too many fathers are MIA. Too many fathers are AWOL, missing from too many lives and too many homes. They've abandoned their responsibilities. They're acting like boys instead of men. And the foundations of our family have suffered because of it. You and I know this is true everywhere, but nowhere is it more true than in the African American community. We know that more than half of all black children live in single-parent households. Half. A number that's doubled since we were children. We know the statistics that children who grow up without a father are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and commit crime. They're 9 times more likely to drop out of school, 20 times more likely to end up in prison. They're more likely to have behavioral problems or run away from home or become teen parents because the father wasn't in the home. The foundations of our community and our country are weaker because of this. We can't simply write these problems off to past injustices. Those injustices are real. There's a reason why our families are in disrepair, and some of it has to do with a tragic history. But we can't keep on using that as an excuse.
Did you recognize that voice? That was Barack Obama on Father's Day in 2008, speaking to the predominantly black Apostolic Church of God in Chicago. Was he racist? Was Barack Obama racist for pointing out the problem of fatherless homes in black communities? No, he wasn't. And neither am I. Facts are facts. And facts are objective, meaning they're true without bias. It is a fact that fatherless homes have higher rates of poverty, crime, dropping out of school, imprisonment, and out-of-wedlock births that then just perpetuate the problem. And that fact holds true for Americans of every race, creed, and color. What's holding black people down is not white privilege, it's father privilege. It's not the presence of the white man that's causing problems in black communities. It's the absence of the black man in the homes of black communities. Intact black families do quite well in America. The recipe for success in America, and this is true for everyone, not just black people, the recipe for success is graduate from high school, get married, then have children, and then stay together as a family. If you'll do that, the likelihood that you and your children will be successful in life is near 100%. And that's near 100% for every demographic. So why have fathers abandoned their children in the black community? And by the way, the reason applies to fathers abandoning their children in every community, not just the black community. It's just that the black community has the highest percentage of fatherless homes. The reason is Democrats. Just like pretty much every social problem in America can be traced to the Democratic Party, so can fatherless homes. And if you want to blame today's problems in the black community on America's terrible systemic mistreatment of black people until about 50 years ago, you'll get agreement from me. It's not the entire cause, but it certainly contributes to it. So whose fault was the terrible treatment of black people in America until about 50 years ago? The Democratic Party. And whose fault is it today? The Democratic Party's. Democrat-imposed welfare policies reward fatherless homes. Nearly every welfare program, and this is applicable to all races, nearly all welfare programs provide more benefits if the mother does not marry the father. Even cohabitation usually results in reduced benefits. Women who get pregnant out of wedlock are encouraged to marry the government, not the child's father. They're encouraged to rely upon the government for housing, food, medicine, daycare, and cash. All in exchange for votes, of course. Democrat votes. What has caused the destruction of the black family in America? It's the same thing that has caused the destruction of white families in America. is just a few decades behind. The destruction of the American family of every race directly correlates to the rules for government welfare programs. Does correlation always mean causation? No. But in this instance, it is the only logical conclusion. And that is why, for at least the past 50 years, the Democratic Party is the biggest threat to the survival of our republic. To wrap it up, the bottom line is, the Black Lives Matter movement is not about saving black lives. It is about electing Democrats. And the dishonesty of their message and their methods is disgraceful. When we get back from this break, Bill Fettke and I will discuss an event tomorrow in Perdido Key, when the Mike Bates Show continues.